I am Shivangi Chaturvedi, Digital Media Executive of Advantage India. I feel more than elated to welcome Mr. Naman Khanijo as my guest for the evening. Um, Before I say anything, I'm delighted and honored to have Naman sir, who holds great knowledge of ESG and apart from that, the trends, climate change, and he has taken out time to share with us his knowledge on our platform, and I just believe get a lot to learn from him today. Before we begin and I hand over to Sir, I'd like to introduce him very briefly. Naman sir graduated from UPES Dehradun and did management development program in artificial intelligence and machine learning from IIM Kozhikode. He has around 10 years of experience in ESG, climate change, and fossil fuel research and product development, IT, and core oil and gas industry. He's currently working with AdFactors PR as an account director and has also worked under ESG with MSCI. Weatherford, like he also has experience in Weatherford and Petrolink. To add to it, he is a trained lawn tennis player, and with jogging and swimming up his tie, he keeps up with fitness levels, and fitness has been so necessary. Like we all are realizing it, and this is so impressive. Lawn tennis, and that to a trained player. We are delighted to have you, sir.
Thank you so much, Shivangi. Thank you so much.
So before beginning, I would request everybody, whatever queries you have, put them down in the chat box. We'll keep answering that in the middle of the session or towards the end of the session. And now I believe there's a presentation that Sir wants to share with the audience, and I'd like to hand it over to him.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shivangi. Thanks for the lovely introduction. And welcome everyone. So how many people do we have on board today, Shivangi?
I guess right side we are 25 in number, the audience.
Right. Great. I mean, those of you who have read my posts, and I keep posting stuff regarding ESG online and on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. So hi everyone. So this is about me. Let's start. And Shivangi has already introduced me. So this slide is about me. I'll just go ahead. So before coming or jumping onto the trends and what ESG is. Yeah, hi Vinod. Yeah, hi Vinod. Yeah,
we can't find any mic. Hello.
Yeah, hi Vinod.
Hello, and the mic working?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Vinod.
Hello.
Yeah. You may mute yourself. If you have a query, we'll take it up later.
Or you can mute them, Shong. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. I mean, so before jumping on to ESG, how did it all evolve and from where did it all start? So earlier we used to have CSR initiatives. All of you might have seen, right? So I'll try to give more examples coming our way as we proceed ahead because I want to keep it laymanish so that all of you understand. So, it becomes easy to relate. So, just imagine a power generation company, right? And a power generation company using coal to generate power. And coal is a non-renewable source of energy, right? So we all know that, they are generating emissions into the environment and they are doing some, they are not doing great by doing that. So they have to diversify their portfolio and all. But what they used to do as a part of CSR initiative, they'll collaborate or plant some 1,000 trees, just to give back to the environment. So that's known as carbon offsetting. So, or they'll collaborate with certain NGOs, like Go Teach Foundation and Go Health Foundation. So this is what these companies are doing as a part of their CSR initiatives. So which is not really, accountable. You can't measure that. So that's how ESG evolved. So ESG is like, measuring certain metrics of the company. And, you have that particular metrics in hand, and then you have the data-driven insights, and then you can quantify that and understand the company's growth in terms of sustainability, all ESG parameters. So E stands for environment, S stands for social, and G stands for governance. So apart from the financial metrics, we also look at the non-financial metrics of a company, and that's ESG for you, right? So coming on to a definition, there is no definition per se of ESG. I was thinking how to communicate it to the wider audience, right? So this is the slide which I put down on LinkedIn. So, imagine a tree to be the company, the trunk to be the revenue. The branches are the business segments, the leaves are the profits, but what you cannot see are the roots that anchor the tree in the ground and helps in the overall function and growth. So that's ESG for you, acting as a root, which is of prime and paramount importance for a company. So that's a ESG per se definition. So when you come at the ESG ecosystem, there are there are data providers in the market. We'll get to learn as we proceed ahead in this presentation. There are some standard setters. Then we have certain assurers. Then we have specialist data providers. So these are all the people who are contributing to the ESG ecosystem per se. So on the slide, you can see like the data providers in the market are Bloomberg, MSCI, Thomson Reuters, FTSE, S&P. So, these are contributing to the data as well as doing the data ratings per se. And, their ratings means to rate a company on ESG parameters and then bring out a rating and tell the investors about, how a company is performing on the ESG parameters. So this is the whole ecosystem all about, and this is where we can see ahead and target ahead that where are the jobs in the market with respect to ESG. You can work with the data providers, you can work with the standard setters, you can work with the rating agencies. So there are 3 to 4 options available. You can work in product research, you can work in data research. We'll get to know ahead. Right. So, this is a broad ESG slide. So environment per se covers climate change issues, environmental laws on the top left side, if you see, and you have toxic waste and other regulation. On the social front, social is what? People, right? Human rights, labor rights, child labor, health and safety, discrimination, harassment, and bullying. So all these factors are monitored under the social lens. And under the governance lens, you see the anti-corruption, anti-money laundering, anti-fraud, regulatory compliance, and the corporate governance procedures of the company. So this is where all ESG came into picture, and slowly and steadily CSR transitioned into ESG, right? So this was a brief overview of what ESG actually is. So where did it pick up pace, right? So this all started with that COP21 conference. You might be aware of the Paris climate change, the COP21 back in 2015 that happened, right? So there it started gaining traction. So if you see the centermost slide, the business responsibility reporting in India. So that's where we stand today with respect to India perspective. So India perspective, we have a regulatory body known as SEBI, right? That Security and Exchange Board Commission. So they are the ones who are setting this BRR reporting in India. So BRR is nothing but a set of 9 principles based on sustainability. They are in tandem with the GRI and SASB. So this is how a company has to report on those 9 principles, and this is how they bring their ESG disclosures out. So right now, there are many challenges in the ESG industry. Reporting is one such challenge. Teaching the company and the corporates itself, what are the benefits of ESG to the company? That's another challenge. They coming out and measuring those metrics. They have to do the risk analysis in terms of their different industries, because every industry has different risks, right? Oil and gas industry will have a different risk. Bank will have a different risk. Petroleum chemical industry will have a different risk. Extraction oil and gas company will have a different risk. So, there are different industries and different sectors and different risks and different mitigation strategies. So, you have all the standards set on those particular factors. So if you see on the right most, the most interesting thing to see is that what factors are the most important to ESG investors. You see 17% is the rate of return, 13% is the past performance. So what about the other percentages, right? So that's about 16% is about social impact, 13% is about environmental impact. So the people, the investors, right? You, me, retail investors, institutional investors, so there are different stakeholders per se. For a ESG per se, there are different stakeholders. Those different stakeholders are the government of the nation, of that particular country, The investors, they may be institutional investors, they may be retail investors like us. The other are the regulatory bodies, for example, SEBI, which I just told you in India. So these are all the stakeholders of the ESG ecosystem which get impacted, right? So you see the trend, the millennials. The millennials these days are most interested in the social and environmental parameters rather than the financial metrics, right? So just to put forward in a very brief example, there are two companies. Let's say both the companies are of similar sizes and business policies, right? And the industry is a textile industry. So both the companies are producing, say, jeans, right? So company A uses 2 tons of water to produce a unit of jean, and company B uses 4 tons of water to produce a unit of jean. So let's imagine their capacity is 100 units per day. The water consumed by company A is 200 tons per day. That amounts to 365,000 tons in 5 years. Similarly, company B, the total water consumption in the next 5 years is like 730,000 tons. The profit wise, company B is like $10 million per year, way ahead than company A. So what an investor, a socially conscious investor, I am a ESG investor. So for me, company A would be more important than company B today, looking at the long-term perspectives. What I vision is that after 5 years, water is a scarce resource. Everyone knows that, right? So there will be fines and penalties levied on particular companies. So company B is violating those norms. It is using a large amount of water for producing 1 unit of jeans. So, in long term, they will be subject to certain fines and levies. So, their profits might go down, right? And company A is sustainably well placed in terms of water consumption today. So, as an investor, I would prefer investing in company A rather than company B. Just an example, there is no company here. This is just an example I'm putting forward. Same goes, so this was under the environmental lens because we were talking about water. The same goes for social parameters, right? So there are two companies, one is having an anti-corruption policy, one is having an employee training policy, one is having an ESOPs. ESOPs means, the shares which are provided to the employees or the CEOs of the company. The code of conduct policy. So everything is yes, all the check boxes are ticked for company A. But company B, none of the check boxes are ticked. Now you tell me as a person, as an employee, you as an employee or as an investor are directly or indirectly related. Where do you want to work, right? So you would want to work in a company which does all, which has some corruption policies, which have some employee training, which have the ESOPs. Any which ways, you will be more tend or inclined to work for company A rather than company B. So this is giving you a social perspective of ESG, right? So, this is a slide which was given to me by one of my mentors in ex-MSCI. He's an ex-MSCI. So, I found this slide to be very detailed and very descriptive. So in one slide, this explains all. What kind of an impact does ESG has on financials of a company? Does a company become bankrupt? Does a company file for bankruptcy? Does it become defunct because it violates ESG norms? The answer is sadly yes, and there are many companies. So the first one being, I'm just picking up a couple of companies here. So, these are various companies falling under ESG violations, in front of you. So, for example, BP oil spill, right? The petroleum engineers might be aware back in 2010, the Macondo disaster, right? So what happened? It costed BP $65 billion. And, you'll be surprised to see the next slide. What are the cost of the mistakes that the companies are still bearing? I'll share it in the next slide. So, for example, Boeing or Volkswagen. So take Boeing, right? So what happened with Boeing 737 MAX? Back in 2019, there were 2 to 3 consecutive crashes, right? With the Lion Air jet, with the Ethiopian Airlines. So, that is falling under the C category. If you see over here, sorry, the S category in the last slide. So in 2019, 737 MAX was grounded worldwide. 346 people died in 2 crashes. Investigations found several systems and manufacturing defects. Going in a bit detailed, what happened in that investigation was there was some problem with the MCAS system. Just to clear it out, MCAS is maneuvering characteristic augmentation system. Artificial intelligence and machine learning. the problem that these systems can have and take over humans, this was one such example. The pilot completely lost control of the airline with the machine taking over. And because of that, there was a nosedive. He could not control the altitude and there was a crash. So, and the people, many people lost their lives, sadly. So this was the result of, that particular disaster, and it was grounded. All the 737 MAX were grounded for about 11 months. They have resumed operations as of 2021 January this year, but there was a loss of $20 billion for Boeing just because of this incident. So, I'll give you a relevant example with respect to India. You'll be thinking that I'm talking about Boeing, I'm talking about Volkswagen, I'm talking about BP. I'll give an example of ICICI Bank, what happened with Chanda Kochar, right? Due to bad loans. That was a purely governance issue. ICICI Bank, Chanda Kochar was, she was responsible for certain bad loans because of its NPAs, bad NPAs, non-performing assets, to Videocon, right? So Videocon was a company, I guess, which her husband had some stake. And because of one particular governance policy, like a clawback and a malus. So, that particular policy basically stops you from selling your shares or buying those shares, whatever. So if you have got certain profits from the company and you are found doing malpractices, right? And if you step down as a director or a CEO, whatever. So, the company will have a right to take those shares back and take those profit backs. So if there was no such clawback or malus policy in place with ICICI Bank, she would have taken away and gone, all the money would have been lost. And today, ICICI Bank would not have been there. So who knows? So because of that policy, these things were under control. So if you see the cost of mistakes, right? All the companies which I spoke about, on the top left corner is Boeing. Because of that grounding, because of that 20 billion losses, you see the stock prices of these companies. They have always plummeted post these disasters, and they have still not recovered. Right? They are on a path to recovery, maybe, who knows, but they are still not recovered. Look at the Volkswagen price on the top, stock price in the top right corner. Once Volkswagen announces fines and they agreed that they have cheated on the emissions and they had fitted those defeat devices to falsify those emissions, their stock prices have plummeted and they're still there. Although Volkswagen is trying to bring it back by, achieving those net zero and, those targets in place and carbon emission reduction strategies, they're getting it back, but you see the effect for yourself. So this is what affects the company financially, right? So these are some companies which are still not there with us. You might be aware with Mahindra Satyam, an Indian company, it become defunct, same governance issues, right? Sarda Group scandal, again, running Ponzi schemes, the founder is unclear, it become defunct, right? Enron scandal, Lehman Brothers, 2008 financial crisis. Pick up any company, defaulting their ESG parameters, they do not exist anymore. So, this is what the impact is ESG has on the companies. Now coming to some trends, it'll make some sense to you guys. So this is like on the left side, you see, the trends, the sustainable and impact investing overview of US. So it's like 26%, like $12 trillion of SRI. SRI is like socially responsible investment, right? So that's, the two terms are interchangeably used, ESG and SRI. So these are like some of the assets that, sustainable investing growth since 2016 is 38%. If you see on the left side bottom, these are some of the growth numbers in terms of US. And on the right, if you see, are the two indexes. One is the emerging market ESG leaders and one is the emerging markets. So obviously you can see that the returns and, the emerging market ESG leaders are outperforming the emerging markets. You can see from the returns itself, right? So this is the cumulative index performance. The graph has been taken from MSCI, it's public. So you can go and check it out, right? You might be interested what's happening in India, right? Why are people so bothered? Is something happening on ground or not? We always talk about ESG. ESG is no more talks. ESG is no more greenwashing. So, things have started. I'm not saying the data is saying that right in front of you. There are 9 ESG themed funds today in India. On the left-hand side, you will see, I guess, 6 of them. And 3 of them have currently been added in January, February, March in due course, like back in 2021, like 3-4 months ago. So there are around 9 funds, one to the likes of SBI. See the assets under management, 2,510 crores of asset under management for SBI, giving a return of 40%. That's something. And if you see on the right hand side, the indexes, there are 2 indexes like Nifty ESG and Nifty 50. Nifty ESG has outperformed Nifty 50 since its inception in 2014. The results are right in front of you. So if you see the bottommost slide, the recently ESG fund launched are Mirae, ICICI, and Axis, like February 2020. I mean, these are like back in 2020, 2021 also there were 2, 3, a couple more, right? So there are 9 of them. So, we can't say that nothing is happening in terms of ESG in India. Things are starting to take place. People are investing in ESG fund. Investors are actually looking forward for ESG. And you might have heard Narendra Modi speaking about ESG in one of his speeches, right? So ESG is gaining traction in India. So now things are starting to change. So basically, this is what ESG and its trends are. Back to you, Shivangi. Sorry, I had to take a lot of time on ESG and its trends because people need to understand what actually ESG is. Then we can move ahead with certain questions of yours, and then probably the oil and gas industry. If you want to cover something on that, we can talk on that too. Yeah.
So, are we done with the presentation, sir?
No, I have some more slides. Probably
Okay.
you can ask questions. You can ask. Let the audience ask some questions,
Okay,
and if I have the slides, yeah.
Till now, it was very interesting. When controversy kicks in, everybody seeks interest. Anybody from the audience, you want to ask anything till now? Anything that came to your mind? Any doubt? Because I guess now the first question that, of course, in my mind was after going through. Okay, we have a question from her. How do you make a business case for common people, investors, to make them in ESG?
Can you elaborate a question a bit more? If you can ask it on the platform itself.
Yeah, Harshal, you can please unmute yourself and ask. I do not understand your question.
I got his question, but I want to, I want him to elaborate more so that I can put some light on that.
To make them invest in ESG. Yeah, it's fine now, I guess. How do you make a business case for common people, investors, to make them invest in ESG? It's financial performance.
Yeah. Can you repeat the question again, Shivangi? Yeah.
The question is, how can common people be directed in ESG rather than just financial performance? Like, how can you make them invest in ESG? Basically, that is what he's trying to ask.
Yeah, I mean, a nice question. So, I've put these slides up. So there is a huge gap today. The people are not aware that these funds exist. The slide which is right in front of you is an answer to your question, right? So people don't know that these funds exist. The people don't know what ESG is. So, there is a gap between investors and the corporates too. So what I'm seeing today is that the corporates, for example, they bring out certain information. They are aligned with the Paris Agreement. They are aligned with certain goals like net zero transition and all. But what they do is that they are not communicating it properly, right? So they might be doing certain assessments. They might be doing collaborating with certain third-party clients and getting their risk profile generated and estimating that and improving on the ESG ratings. But that thing is not coming out to the general audience. So I believe that certain amount of communication, as a member of, I'm working in Ad Factors PR, so this is one of our use cases, right? So the communication is not proper. How to bring about and amplify that information correctly in the minds of people. So, that is what we are working on today. Absolutely right. I mean, perfect question to ask for at this time. We are lacking in that. There are challenges, but that's what we need to do. The companies are starting, to the likes of Anand Mahindra. If you pick up, Tata, you can pick up L&T, you can pick up big majors in India, right? All the founders of these companies, they say, and they have communicated that ESG is something that we are looking for, and they are doing certain stuff. We can take a case to case analysis, not right now we can't discuss those companies right here. But yes, coming forward, I'll show you some examples of the oil and gas companies, their energy transition, would give you a brief insight about this. Yeah.
Okay, so we have few more questions to address. There's this question. Recently, Volkswagen overtook Tesla as the most valuable company by market cap. How were they able to do it even after all the scandal?
Nice question, bro. Those who have put it. So that's what I told you, just a second. Just let me get it. So you're talking in terms of market cap, right? So the market cap, I've recently not done any research on Volkswagen versus Tesla, but Tesla is something, what are the business segments into, and what are the Volkswagen doing? You have to go step by step. You have to identify what is Volkswagen doing, what are their initiatives ahead. Yeah. And sorry. Yeah. And what is Tesla doing? What are the plans of Tesla ahead? So what I showed you, just you're asking a nice question, but the thing is that there are many other parameters to ESG. This is just ESG. There are certain parameters like financial parameters too. We are talking about a market cap, which is a financial parameter. So that's their business strategy. So I haven't done a research on their business strategy yet, right? So what makes them overtook their market cap? What special did they do? Nice question for you to research too, right? So this is something that you should look forward to, considering the ESG parameters in hand. Their stock prices say a lot. What I'm saying is their stock prices say a lot. Their stock prices have plummeted. They are still not picked up. They are still on the line to pick it up. I mean, they will get up. They will rise soon if they follow this trend, if they work hard toward ESG. But that's something that business strategy do. So that's something you should go and ask the Tesla people or the Volkswagen people, or do your own research so that you get some clear answers on that. Yeah.
Okay, there's another question from Abhijit Thakkar. He appreciates the presentation, first of all, and saying, what do you think is the major concern developing nations are facing in implementing ESG strategies? Also, does voluntary and compliance market exist in this domain?
Also does?
Voluntary and compliance market exist in this domain.
Yeah, so I showed you the slide, so this is what Abhijit. So Abhijit, what's happening in India and emerging markets. So India is one of the emerging markets, right? So looking at India, what SEBI has recently done is we're talking about BRR reporting, like business responsibility reporting. It has 9 principles which are aligned with the sustainability thing. So what it does is, the top 1,000 listed companies were earlier voluntarily, they had to disclose their information based on those sustainability parameters. Now, what SEBI has recently come up with is the BRSR. That's, business responsibility and sustainability reporting. So that's more in line, and what is being expected is like 70 to 80% of the parameters with respect to GRI. That is one of the standard setters like SASB. So those parameters will be aligned with the sustainability parameters, and top 1,000 listed companies they have to mandatorily disclose on those lines. Right now, it is voluntary, but by FY 2022, they have to do a mandatory reporting as per SEBI. Now, again, a question, so we speak a lot of things. There are a lot of challenges with respect to India. There is a different geography. It is a different domain altogether. There are different challenges. I would like to bring here an example with respect to a logistic company. I can't take the name. It's a company which I'm working on right now. So, a company, for example, in US has set up a carbon neutral plan. So it's an air, and a ground logistics company into courier services. Okay. So they have a plan, right? What their carbon neutral plan with respect to 2050, 2040 is, doing vehicle electrification, having a carbon capture strategy in place, or, working on their aircraft modernization of fleet, right? So, working on sustainable packaging because they're into courier services, they can work on sustainable packaging. Because they are into delivery services, they can work on sustainable fuels to use in their aircraft modernization. So this is what their strategy is based on US or any other developed market. But when they come to India, right? So how should it change, right? Coming to the vehicle electrification with respect to US, they were tying up with various organizations who were into EVs, right? So now they are using, as a part of the ground delivery fleet, they are using certain vans, certain EV driven vans, right? But in India, there are no EV manufacturers for vans, right? There are like to the likes of Mahindra Electric, like Mahindra Logistics and all, but Mahindra is doing that. But in India, the scenario is different. In India, 79% of the sales are of two-wheelers. 10% of the sales are from electric autos, right? 2 to 3% of the sales are from vans and certain commercial or passenger vehicles. So India, we cannot adopt the same strategy for that particular country in India. So looking at the vehicle electrification and the policy, you might be aware of the FAME policy, right? Faster adoption and manufacturing. I don't remember completely. The FAME policy, it's currently in the phase 2. Looking at the sales numbers in India, looking at the challenges in India, looking at the companies which are providing these EV vehicles in India, that's one part. Then the another part is vehicle charging infrastructure in place. So that's another challenge they don't face much in California or in certain developed markets, but that's another challenge they face in India, right? The last mile delivery. Here you are delivering in India, you have to deliver your courier and parcels to the, to the likes of certain Zillas or Gaons or Parishads, and, there you can't have the EV infrastructure and EV vehicles in place. There you need certain EV two-wheelers or EV autos, which are more commercial and, which makes more sense to get it over there, right? In terms of charging, in terms of everything. So, you have to do a case-to-case research study. You pick up a company. That's what I'm saying. You pick up a company, you understand its business segments. You do a research that what are they doing in the developed markets. You come to India, and if they want to develop a business plan in India, what will they do differently? What are the challenges in India? You have to study that. I was talking with respect to vehicle electrification. There can be challenges with respect to carbon capture and storage. In India, there is how many companies are doing carbon capture and storage, right? Tesla, Tesla to the likes, I guess there was a tweet from this Elon Musk, right? To give some amount of money as a part of, to certain startups which are investing in carbon capture and storage. But what's happening in India? We need more such people, apart from just talking. Apart from certain leaders in India, apart from just talking and giving out statements, we need certain initiatives. We need certain actions from these people like Anand Mahindra, from people like L&T heads and, Tata and everyone, Mahindra or whatever, Ratan Tata. So whosoever are there, these are the influencers of Indian economy, right? So they need to take up actions. They need to set certain goals to the likes of Elon Musk, say, Ratan Tata comes up today and puts up a tweet and says, this is what I'm gifting or, I'm giving out as a prize to companies which come up with a startup plan, right? And on carbon capture. Now the companies will start doing it. There will be companies, there will be incubators which are formed and people will start working on that, right? So this is how to go about it. There are a lot of initiatives to be done as an emerging market. There are a lot of challenges, but, it's slowly and steadily picking up pace. That's I tried to give you an example. I hope it clarifies your answer.
Would you like to take one more question? Then we'll proceed with the rest of the presentation.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so there's this question in the chat box only. Jeff Bezos only recently stepped down as the CEO of Amazon, and since many years he was the CEO as well as the chairman, which is not ideal governance structure for a company. Despite having not so good governance structure, they always are growing. So do you think good governance just for the argument's sake, and companies can survive and thrive without that. Case in point, Amazon.
Wow, I mean, such a big question. I'm tired of speaking, but yeah, just let me get over my thoughts. So I'll like to answer it very briefly because there are many other people in this, who won't get the technicalities and the technical jargons. This is a very technical question. So, again, it's on a company basis. Right now, I have not done a company research. I can put Amazon in front of me. So let's take it piece by piece. What's Amazon into? Amazon is into different business segments, right? Amazon is into OTT, right? Amazon is into their selling of products, goods, services, whatever, courier services, whatever. So Amazon is into two to three different business segments, right? You have to break down those segments, and you have to understand that how much revenue is being derived from which particular segments. And then based on that, you have to understand that where are the particular risks for this particular company. Coming back to your question, governance was a risk. Jeff Bezos resigning, people might not be aware what governance actually entails. So I have not covered that here, but what governance actually entails is like in India. I'll just try to give you an example. Like in India, you have a lot of family firms, right? You might have seen Harshad Mehta scam, right? So from that particular movie, I'll just try to link that thing up. Harshad Mehta scam, what does it say? If there are family firms, there's a problem in the governance. A lot of shares are not public, but they are in the hands of those owners. Unless and until they release those shares and make those shares public, certain things can happen and the company can grow. But they have to let it go, right? They have to let go those shares. Same problem exists in the Japanese market. Same legacy in the governance. Their ancestors, then their ancestors, then their successors, then their successors, like to the likes of my grandfather, then my father, then I'm here. So this is what is happening in terms of governance with respect to the Japanese market. But Japanese market is a developed market, and Indian market is a developing market. So it's an apples to orange comparison. But these are some parameters like you need to see in terms of governance and governance risk. So a company is not only rated on the basis of governance, but it's also rated on the basis of ENS. So to clarify to my audience, when we rate a company or when we do a ratings for a company, we have these three pillars and certain amount of weights are given to each of the pillars. Like E will be given a 30-35% weight, S will be given a 30-35% whatever weight, and G will be given the less 33% weight. So there is a weightage which is given to the company based on the industry or the sector it is in. Okay. I'll not go into details at how that weightage is given, how do we calculate that, because that's out of the scope for this particular conversation. So considering all these weightages, as you said that Jeff Bezos resigning and problem in the governance sector, there can be some issues that Amazon is working well on. There can be some issues like it's rated high on E, it's rated high on S, and the lack of governance policies for Amazon, may not be able to, outshine. E and S are outshining G. So that's what I'm trying to explain. The weightage for E and S goes above and the governance goes down. So, that's why the rating for Amazon goes up. So, and that's what happens, that it's rated better than other peers in its benchmarking. So, this was just to give a brief idea. I'll not go into much detail. Our majority of the audience should not get confused. So this is how things are done on the ESG perspective. I hope it clarifies your question.
Okay, so if you want, we can answer quite a few questions. If you want, we can begin further, we can continue with the presentation as it is.
Yeah, I mean, if you have certain questions, Shivangi, you can put it across, and then probably I can share my slides with respect to some oil and gas industries too. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll then ask one or two questions that I had. Okay, so we're seeing and hearing a lot of chatter from the large integrated oil majors about their stated ESG goals,
right?
The strategies.
Right.
When it comes to the mid-sized and smaller independent E&P operators who operate on razor-thin margins, What are some things they can do around ESG to differentiate themselves among their peers as we head into 2021?
Right. I mean, this is a question, but before this question, I would like to answer something about, where these industries are placed. So, imagine the industries to be in a pyramid, right? That pyramid, energy extraction, like extraction of oil and gas, extraction of coal, extraction of metals and minings, they're at the top of the pyramid. The most exposed companies to ESG risks, right? We come down, that is where the carbon stranded assets are. So basically what I'll just explain you, let me just give you a brief on this. Then we come down to the transition risks. So the transition risks can be broadly classified into operational and product. So what kind of risks are there in the market? There are market risks, there are regulatory risks, there are technology risks. So these 3-4 major broad categories of risks are evaluated for these particular companies. So if we come down and see, for example, a petroleum refinery, right? A petroleum refinery, the output is gasoline, probably, for one refinery. For one refinery, the output is natural gas. But, the risk that is here is your transition risk with respect to its products. So, with ESG regulations coming into picture, and the regulatory bodies putting pressure that you should reduce your emissions, and you should work on your technology and upgrade your technology, because of which say gasoline, you cannot extract gasoline, or you cannot extract crude oil in the very beginning, which is your input to the refinery, and your output is your gasoline. So the whole supply chain gets affected because of one particular regulation that's coming into picture. So that's the kind of a transition risk that is there for a petroleum refinery or an automobile manufacturer. Pick up an automobile manufacturer. Let's say the India is coming up with a EV policy of its own, right? And let's say tomorrow I plan to, obviously I can't do it tomorrow, but I'm just giving a hypothetical example. Let's say tomorrow I say that, we are moving away from ICE to EVs. Now, what happens to the automobile ancillary manufacturers? They are manufacturing components for internal ICE means internal combustion engines. So they are manufacturing components for ICEs, but they have not diversified their portfolio to manufacture batteries, because when you transition from ICE to EV, you look at the product and the component manufacturers, you have to manufacture batteries, you have to manufacture certain other things which are related to EVs, right? So they have to incorporate that particular risk today, diversify their portfolio. Otherwise, they will be exposed to these transition risks. I hope you're getting my point. To the likes of, if we come down the pyramid, to the likes of banks, like some months ago, I was wondering that how are banks exposed to these ESG risks? I mean, how can a bank be exposed to ESG? That question might come into your mind too. So what banks or investment banks do is they are indirectly lending. Say a bank is indirectly lending to a oil and gas extraction company. It's lending money for an exploration in Nordic Sea, so the Nordic area, right? But say tomorrow Norway comes up with a regulation that no more extraction, and Norway does have a plan of they have a plan by 2040 they want to completely move away from extraction and production of fossil fuels. So today, exploration may, I'm investing so much of money, I'm lending as a bank, I'm lending to that particular company who is doing exploration and appraisal in the Nordic Sea, right? But looking at, because exploration is a huge activity, I mean, you take 10 years, 15 years, just to come to a conclusion that we have reserves over there. We invest so much of money, but we had not evaluated the ESG risks, the long-term risk that exists. I have invested so much of money. Tomorrow, that company, that ENP company, extraction and production company, that's such a risk, it becomes defunct. It has not diversified its portfolio. What about my money as a bank? That money is a bad loan, right? That money is an NPA for me, the non-performing assets. My NPAs keep on increasing. So this is how indirectly I am linked to that particular ESG risk as a bank. So for a bank, these risks are less as compared to the energy companies on the top of the pyramid, but they exist too. So you'll see certain banks coming up with their climate portfolio and risk assessment and ESGs. Many of the banks have come up. I guess Bank of England was the first bank to come up with a climate risk portfolio, if you see their report. So things are starting to take place, and this is how it is getting affected. So, this is what carbon stranded assets are. This is what the operational and the product risk is. If you see that pyramid, now you have that picture in your mind, I believe. Now moving to your question, Shivangi, what ENP companies are doing, right? So, integrated, to be very sure. So, Shell, we have two companies. So just for our users who are not petroleum engineers, so integrated companies of oil and gas are those companies who are involved in extraction of oil and gas plus production, and then transferring it midstream, then selling it to refineries. So they are involved in the entire value chain of energy. But an independent ENP firm is only into extraction of oil and gas. So post that, they are not involved. They are deriving their revenues from the sales of oil and gas. But companies like Shell, Exxon, BP, they're all integrated companies. So the example that I'm showing you right now, this is the reserves. This is a live data, all right. So what I've done is that I've taken up data from their site, from the reports. This is the reserves data from Shell, right? And I've taken the stock price data. I've tried to map it, just to get some sense of stock price and their reserves portfolio. Shell and all these companies say they're not oil and gas majors now. They are energy companies. They are diversifying. They are quite climate focused. They have come out with their energy transition reports. Back in 2017, they started doing it, right? So now you see the trend. The top black one, the left side of the graph, if you see, it's crude oil. On the top, it's the oil sands. Just for the users, oil sands is a kind of oil only. So, that's very viscous in nature, having a very low gravity. So, that's oil sands. Then you have oil, crude oil, and then you have natural gas. So these three are the basic things in the fossil fuel industry. So, these are the products basically. So I've tried to map them. If you see, after 2016, there is a sudden dip, in the oil sands. So oil sands are very, very commercially very costly for the company to exploit. Why? Because one, they're very viscous, right? So after getting them out from the ground, what you call is that thermal injection or steam injection, to be very frank. And getting it out, reducing their viscosity, and then making it ready for transportation. It's a very costly process when compared to gas and when compared to normal crude oil. So what they decided to do was to pull out from the oil sands producing fields. So if you see, that trend started back in 2017. I'm not talking about 2014, where the oil price slump happened and these companies faced a heat with falling of stock prices. You can see their stock prices plummeted back in 2015 and 2016. There was a huge decline. The yellow line you see is a stock price. And when they started coming up with a transition back in 2016, they put up that we are transitioning. We will diversify our portfolio. We will move away from oil and gas. We will invest in green. Green means renewables, right? So they reduced their portfolio for oil sands, and then the stock prices started increasing. You see, on the right hand side, you can also evaluate the top line, yellow line on the right side of the graph, is the total net additions of reserves. The total net addition of reserves are seeing a gradual decline from 2017 to 2018 to 2019. That means these oil and gas industry majors are not adding new reserves as they were previously. They are actually moving away. So if you want to see, for a company publishing a report on transition, you can pull out these metrics and you can put it up and plot that data, and you will actually see that whether a company is actually doing it or not. I'll show you some examples where the companies like ahead have come up with a transition report, but they're actually not doing anything with respect to their portfolio. So, I just put up, you can have other metrics too. To look if they are investing in green, you can pick up their capex numbers, their capex, their capital expenditures. You pick up their balance sheet, check their capex in renewables. How much of renewables they're investing into, like solar, wind, geothermal, whatever. So these are the certain renewables. Are they adding anything? Are they buying the RECs? RECs are renewable energy certificates. That's a kind of an offset they do. Are they actually investing into developing solar power plants or power generation? What are they doing? So this is just one reserves figure. You can pick up their production numbers. What I did was pick up a production profile of a company. To answer to your question, Shivangi, an independent E&P firm is only dependent on the revenues from sale of oil and gas. So tomorrow or today, what is happening is you see the prices. It's like 60. What's that? 60 WTI prices, 60 or 65. What's it? It was 120, 130, 200. I don't know. What was it like some 10 years back? That story has now changed after 2014 or 2012. So, that's not going to recover as soon as possible. So these E&Ps have to diversify like these oil and gas majors are doing. So that's what my point is. If they are entirely dependent on their fossil fuel mix and on the sale of oil and gas and extraction, tomorrow if a regulation comes in Canada, they say, boss, oil and gas mining pay, we have carbon taxes. So after such certain amount of extraction, since you have emitted 100 tons of carbon dioxide in the air, you cannot extract more oil. You cannot. So what are they going to do? What is their business plan? They do not have anything else to do apart from that, right? So they have to diversify their portfolio today, and they have to start today. Otherwise, sadly, they will meet the fate like I showed you in the previous slide. So that's what is happening. These are the challenges which are faced by the oil and gas industry. They should take these integrated oil and gas majors. Of course, there are challenges. Shell, Exxon, Chevron are like top players in the market, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. A E&P compared to a Fortune 100 will have a lot of challenges, but they have to act today. They have to diversify their portfolio. That's what I'm saying. If you see Exxon, now I was researching it like a couple of days back. So this is just for you guys, So I did this. I had collected some reserve numbers. You see a dip on the left-hand side in 2016 and 17. And a dip in the oil sands specifically. And then they have again come back to normal in 2018 and 2019. The oil sands are again back to normal, right? I mean, you see there, they had certain amount of, so these on the left-hand side, these are reserves in MMBOE, barrels of oil equivalent, just for your clarity. So again, the reserves are back to normal. Dude, Exxon, energy transition, does it ring any bell? No, man. I mean, I don't think so. So, everything is right in front of you, crystal clear. What actually happened here was, as per the SEC regulations, the prices were so low for oil and gas, and especially oil sands, because it's already commercially not viable to extract them. What they did not classify, these reserves in 2016 did not classify as probable proved reserves, so they could not list them and show them in their reports. So that's what happened. They did not diversify or divest their investments from oil sands. They're actually still there, hanging on. They have their oil sands reserves. That's what happened in 2018, because they didn't buy anything new. Those reserves were there, but they did not classify. So, man, I would just like to tell you guys to, if you really are like budding petroleum engineers, this is how you connect ESG and petroleum, right? There is a lot to do in the field. So this is where your expertise will come into play, because nobody else knows, like, what are you talking about? Reserves, production, what the hell is this? Reserves, production, stock prices, what are you talking about, man? So this is how you're going to correlate stuff, and come up with their own research. So there is a thing for data scientists. There are budding data scientists. Like your last podcast was on AI and ML for oil and gas. So the people in the oil and gas industry who are like data experts, they can come up with those with these numbers. They can plot them out in Python, or they can plot them out in Excel, whatever. They can plot them out in Tableau, So there are certain amount of things that you can do and come up and study on your own. There is no matter for ESG in the market. There are certain courses which I'll share the links with you, but there is no specific pathway that you follow for ESG. So this is how you learn ESG. And when you're going for an interview for example, an oil and gas engineer is going for an interview for a ESG firm, let's say, how he's going to add value. If you show this kind of research to a ESG firm, I'm telling you, one or two odd firms, not all probably, who are not into energy space, but the ones who are into energy space, they will be like blown away with your research. This is something that you can give them. So boss, they're talking about energy transition, but what they're actually doing is this. This is my research under ESG. So these are the things that can, one guy or one person should target for. Yeah, that's
Actually, my next question was about the opportunity and how to go further in ESG, but you already answered it.
yeah.
I guess we'll move forward with the presentation now, sir.
Yeah, that's it, man. I have certain training links.
Okay.
The first one being, I'll share it out with you guys in the chat. The first one is the CFI. You can start your ESG. What is ESG? Introduction to ESG. Then the second one is the TCFD hub, specifically related to climate change. You go dig deeper. Don't start with, all these are free courses. All right. The third link is the ESG ratings methodology. It is public. I mean, you can go and check MSCI's ESG rating methodology. You can read about it, what the company is doing, how the ratings is done, how a corporate is trying to, improve its rating. You'll get to know about here. And then the final link is about the climate SCR. So that's handled by GARP. That's an organization. That's a paid course, around 75,000 INR. But you should not immediately plunge into this. I would say just go do your research, attend some free courses, enroll over there, and then go for a deeper course and a paid course. So, and you can do, of course, like, I just showed you, you can do your own research and, read those transition reports of integrated oil and gas majors and what they are planning to do ahead.
So has COVID, made an impact on, if I talk of ESG for petroleum, petroleum was already in a backlash position. COVID proved to, if I talk of mining or if I talk of oil and gas, COVID has just, given a very tough pull to it. So has ESG also been affected, like the employment, the opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, with respect to oil and gas, as you said, that it has happened and it has taken a hit. And with respect to COVID-19 pandemic, first of all, this virus is deadly, and we still don't know, and there are many theories to it. We can argue, there is no point of getting into an argument right now. People are facing a lot of crisis. There is health infrastructure has fallen, and when we compare India, right? So, I mean, COVID-19, why has, at first, how can you link ESG and COVID-19, and, how ESG industry is booming in COVID-19, right? What has happened is, like, human and animal contact, that's one theory that has come up why this virus is spreading. There's illegal trading of animals, like, people consuming animals to, cutting them. This is how that virus has spread, right? So this is one theory, and the other theory is of some biological thing that has happened, it's an induced virus. That's, we are getting into argument's sake, there is no point. But if we see that, these illegal trading practices are happening, there is a human animal contact that is taking place, that is what is resulting in these pandemics. Now this pandemic, you can't expect this pandemic to happen, like, you don't want it to happen at first place, but this is before its time, right? There was one thing that we as a people of India or as a people of this country were not paying. We are paying for our oxygen today. That's the only thing that is left to be taxed. But sadly, we are paying for our oxygen. So please get up, guys. I mean, we are paying for water. Tomorrow, I mean, if water crisis happens and if we still go on consuming water today at the rate that we are consuming today, no point we are paying $1,000 and we are standing in the line outside for water. I mean, it's not far. It's happening. I mean, now is the time to get up. That's what I'm saying. That it's happening today. I mean, people say, "Arey, hamari time mein thodi na hoga yaar, COVID-19, it's not there." I mean, that these kind of pandemics won't affect us. This kind of attitude doesn't work. What about your future generations? They are going to come. Bhai, tu to ji jayega, you will live. But what about your children, right? Your family members. So you have to think on those terms. So ESG as a company, or ESG as a business, all these companies which were ESG compliant, they were better placed in the market with respect to the companies which are not ESG compliant. So that's what I have been talking, because they were ESG compliant, and because they were aware of these risks, these kind of pandemics, and they were already immune to this. They had their business operations diversified, all those risks were mitigated, better mitigated, not all, but some. But they are better placed today than the companies which are not ESG compliant. So as far as the job opportunities are concerned, with respect to oil and gas, ESG has not taken that amount of a hit. Their opportunities are still open in the space. I mean, there are many. You can reach out to me. I can help you, depending on your whatever your requirements, or as I showed you the slide, there are many things under ESG. You go into data research, you go into product research, you go into ratings, you go into some other typical data analysis and business intelligence. There are 4, 5, 6 numerous options out there in the ESG field itself. So first you have to identify where are you better placed, what do you want to do. There is an option available for communications, like I'm doing right now. So I am in a PR firm, and I never imagined that why communications is so important with respect to ESG. What can a PR firm do with respect to ESG? There are many people who might be thinking, when I put it on LinkedIn, join Adfactors PR, what will a PR firm do in ESG? There is a lot to be done. I have just given you an example of one air logistics company that I'm working, right? So there are many other companies that you work for, actually developing a strategy for them with respect to India or with respect to other markets. There is a lot to be done in this space. So there are so many options open with respect to ESG in the market.
Like recently also, there has been a lot of, talk about the gender equality in companies. I guess that also comes under the S factor in ESG, if I'm not wrong, because that also comes under how companies treat the employees and how the gender equality is based. We had a podcast regarding that as well.
Yeah.
So as mentioned in the chat box, the S factor is so much related to ESG, how the company treats society and people.
Right.
All of this, I guess it's a vast, field to enter into.
Yeah. So not only petroleum graduates, not only you, not only anyone else. I mean, somebody who is a social enthusiast, somebody who has done something in the field of social, right? I mean, social strategy, social impact, people working in the CSR domain want to enter into ESG. That's happening because that transition is taking place. As I earlier said, CSR does not give you countable metrics. You do not have the metrics, that a company has planted 1,000 trees, that's it. As company has tied up with various NGOs, but you cannot rate a company or based on certain parameters. ESG gives you that option, to rate a company based on certain metrics. Take those metrics up, understand those metrics. Like I just showed you, for an oil and gas company, there are so many metrics. There is capex, there is reserves, there is production, there is stock price. Pick up those metrics. You can measure a company's performance, and then you can come up in the market. So that's what is happening. I mean, that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the shocking thing is, we were not quite aware of this. I mean, though it has so much opportunity, and still, but thank you for coming up and making us aware. We can get this slide on your LinkedIn. These links that are just right.
I'll share the links which I have shared as a starting point. People can go and study these things, and I'll suggest you to start with the first link. And right, that's about it. And if somebody wants to have certain courses available, I am thinking of drafting some courses, and probably looking for some partners to share my courses too. Because there is a dearth of information for ESG. There is a lot to be. This is just 1 hour. 1 hour. If you say someone explain ESG to me, I have tried my best. I best foot forward. I don't know how much effective I was, but I hope I have made many people clear as to what ESG is, what are the trends. Yeah. So this is about it. There is so much in detail to be studied, and we can take up those courses and we can put them out on various platforms, and people can benefit from them.
okay, we sure will get in touch with you regarding, because we ourselves deal in courses. So I guess we've come to the end. I don't think anybody else has any doubts. All of them are just appreciating your effort in the chat box as of now.
Thank you so much.
I also saw Prateek sir's message. Prateek Kumar sir was there with us in the previous podcast, and he has also written, thanks for sharing information. Thank you, Prateek sir, for being there in the podcast today. I guess that's it. Everybody who's there, please get vaccinated as soon as possible. Please stay indoors. That's the least anybody can say as of now. And thank you, Naman sir, once again for sharing this information. This is very vital, something which we and something which we should know, and we sure would get back to you regarding the courses.
Sure.
We would love to collaborate on that level. So again, guys, stay safe, get vaccinated, and I would sure meet you in the next podcast. Thank you, Naman sir.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. Take care. Get yourself vaccinated, and please take care of your family members. Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, thank you, everybody.